Sentient Beings. I'm Shamika.
And I'm Jess, and we are SciFi in real life.
That's right. This is the show where we use science fiction stories to help us talk about contemporary tech issues. And this will actually be our last episode. Cue Boys to Men, but not actually, because copyright.
And more about that later. But first, before we dive in, remember, there will be spoilers in this episode. So make sure that you go watch the movie The Circle, which, oh my gosh, that's the movie that we're analyzing. Watch the movie The Circle, and then come back and enjoy our discussion and our ethical contemplation afterwards.
Yes, and whether or not you heed our warning, let's start with the description of this movie. So today we're diving into the 2017 film The Circle. As described by Google, May Holland, played by Emma Watson, seizes the opportunity of a lifetime and she lands a job with the world's most powerful technology and social media company. Encouraged by the company's founder, played by Tom Hanks, May joins a groundbreaking experiment that pushes the boundaries of privacy, ethics, and personal freedom. Her participation in the experiment and every decision she makes soon starts to affect the lives and futures of her friends, family, and that of humanity. So, for one last time, it's time for our ethical dilemma dance. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it! Oh wow, I'm gonna miss that.
Oh yeah. Our first ethical dilemma is about surveillance, in particular, work and school surveillance. Standard Toilet, a company in the UK, filed a patent in 2019 for a toilet that has a 13-degree slant downward in an effort to reduce the time people are using it. Sold to municipalities and offices in an effort to literally keep people moving, this level of hostile design, similar to hostile architecture, such as benches that are designed to prevent people from laying on them, is just one way workplaces are getting employees to be as productive as possible. We already know about the Amazon workers who are so pressed filling orders in the warehouses or delivering packages that using the bathroom at all becomes a tragic ordeal that doesn't always result in getting to an actual bathroom. Employers, even before the pandemic, were monitoring their employees' emails, Slack messages, and even keystrokes. But during the pandemic, they got a whole lot more technical. Quote, from cameras that automatically track employees' attention to software monitoring whether employees are off task, Bossware, according to Stanford University's Institute on Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, or HI, is, quote, AI-based digital platforms or software programs that monitor employee performance and time on task. Tech is being used to push a capitalistic productivity by any means necessary. Surveillance is also not just on the job. In schools, students are being surveilled and the technology is not being experienced equally. Students with darker skin tones, aka students of color, are being flagged by testing software like Proctorio that cannot pick up their faces literally half the time. In a time where remote schooling is often the safest and only option, the added stress of having to take extra effort just to be seen by the software in order to then take your test is yet one more of the 1,000 little cuts of micro and macroaggressions that Black, Indigenous, and people of color endure. In the circle, several shots show the sea change cameras positioned throughout the campus and even on top of people's computers. The surveillance is not hidden, but rather celebrated. But as we will discuss, the price of transparency may be higher than any of us realized.
So our second ethical dilemma for this episode, in this one, we will be discussing the value tension between transparency and privacy. This is a tension that came up quite a bit in the movie The Circle. But first, what is transparency actually? The word transparent means to be easily seen through, recognized, or detected. It also means to be open, frank, and candid. So when it comes to technological transparency, being easily detected might imply that you're not anonymous, or you are allowing yourself to be digitally tracked through something like cookies or your GPS on your phone. To be technologically open, frank, and candid is also a form of transparency, and it's often not seen today in our digital world. In fact, digital platforms like social media have gotten a lot of pushback over the years for a lack of transparency from users, making people wonder if anyone is really being their true authentic self on social media, or if all online interactions and posts are just fake recountings of lives that are portrayed in the ways we wish to be seen. Now, let's explore the word privacy. Privacy is defined as, quote, the state or condition of being free from being observed or disturbed by other people, and also the state of being free from public attention. So privacy in regards to digital technologies seems to kind of be the opposite of transparency. While transparency begs for easy detection and being open with the public, privacy pleads for no detection and being closed off from the public. When it comes to technology, sometimes this tension between transparency and privacy can become problematic. For example, at the beginning of COVID-19 in our pandemic in 2020, you might remember that Apple and Google teamed up to create COVID tracking software that was able to contact trace the virus using the Bluetooth on our phones. However, many people chose to not opt into this service because they felt it would infringe on their privacy. They didn't trust that Google and Apple would keep their location information and who they had been around a secret. And with Google's recent past of working with the Pentagon, many feared that their location might get shared with the government and used against them in the future. So, reasonably, they valued privacy over transparency. Although, many of those people who did value privacy got pushback for opting out of this contact tracing service because transparency in this scenario meant that we might be able to combat the virus much quicker by tracing it as it spread throughout the world. So at one point in the movie The Circle, the CEO of The Circle, Eamon Bailey, who we previously mentioned was played by Tom Hanks, said that transparency breeds accountability. However, he himself still refused to be fully transparent because he valued his personal privacy. So while it may be true that transparency can breed accountability, transparency can also breed things like fear, anxiety, confusion, and surveillance. And is too much transparency a bad thing? Is too much privacy a bad thing? Who will win this battle between the two? Stay tuned to find out. And on to our final ethical dilemma for this final episode. We will be talking about the tech industry, antitrust laws, and what happens when tech gets too big. First, let's discuss what's called data overcollection. In 2016, the GDPR, otherwise known as the General Data Protection Regulation, was agreed upon by the European Parliament and was enacted into EU law to try to protect the privacy and data of EU citizens. Since the instantiation of the GDPR, many large tech companies have actually been held accountable to have healthier relationships with their users' data. In principle number 2 of the GDPR, the regulation stands against data overcollection, which in theory, this principle is supposed to require tech platforms to only collect as much data as they actually need, and to be transparent about all the data that they are collecting. And this principle stemmed from a dangerous precedent that tech companies set, where for a while they were collecting unnecessary data from their users, which risked being harmful if the companies ever actually decided to sell our data or use it against us, or if the data risked being stolen by malicious hackers. Have you ever heard of the expression, data is the new oil? Well, back in 2017, The Economist published a story titled, "The World's Most Valuable Resource is No Longer Oil, but Data." And the idea behind this article was that the oil industry has been largely lucrative and extractive and is bankrolling some of the richest people in the world. And now, data is the new lucrative bankroller, and when it is extracted from users, it's often at those users' expense. So luckily, regulations like the GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act have begun to rein in this oil race, so to say, but a lot of damage has already been done, and this damage is largely being done by a select few tech giants.
Yes, and speaking of these select few tech giants, there's the big four. There's Amazon, Google, Facebook, and what's the fourth one? Oh, tartar sauce.
Wait, Amazon, Google, Facebook.
Or maybe it's just the big three because they took all the other companies
I guess
and absorbed them. Or
it could be Apple and Microsoft, I
yeah,
guess.
Yeah.
Hard to keep track.
Oh my gosh, I'm surprised there's that many. So there are a few companies that seem to own a large portion of the market. In entertainment, Disney reigns supreme. Known as the Disney Brothers cartoon studio at its founding in 1923, Disney now owns fully or significantly the following companies according to iFilmThings: ABC, 80% stake in ESPN, Touchstone Pictures, Marvel, Lucasfilms, 50% equity holding with the Hearst Corporation that owns A&E, 50% equity holding with the Hearst Corporation for the History Channel, and 50% equity holding with Hearst Corporation for Lifetime. There's also Pixar, Hollywood Records, 10% stake in Vice Media, and Core Publishing. Whew. Taking a cue from the entertainment industry, tech companies have long grown and acquired companies. Microsoft faced antitrust laws in the late 1990s and was ordered to break into two companies, only to appeal that decision and have it overturned. Google has faced multiple antitrust laws, having to break up into Alphabet Inc. and Google. And recently, Wired reported on the 36 antitrust lawsuits that Google is facing. Quote, the U.S. Department of Justice filed the first case in October, joined initially by 11 Republican state attorneys general. This is the narrowest of the three lawsuits. It claims that Google has used anti-competitive tactics to protect its monopoly over general search and prevent rival search engines from getting a foothold. Most notably, the complaint describes the lengths Google has gone to make sure it's the default search engine on browsers and smartphones, like paying Apple as much as $12 billion each year to make Google the default on Safari and iPhones. With its control over the search market secure, the suit says Google can rake in more search advertising revenue, which in turn allows it to keep the payouts flowing. The DOJ, Department of Justice, argues that this amounts to an illegal scheme to maintain Google's monopoly over search. The second case about Google search, and the third to be filed overall, comes from a coalition of more than 30 states led by the attorneys general of Colorado and Nebraska. It essentially makes the same argument as the DOJ lawsuit, plus a few more accusations. In fact, the states have requested that their suit be combined with the DOJ's. The most important new piece is the allegation that Google has used its monopoly over general search, the activity commonly known as Googling, to discriminate against companies in what's known as the vertical search business like Yelp or Kayak. The idea is that Google wants people to begin all their searches on Google rather than going straight to a vertical search site or app. The states argue that Google has accordingly made changes over the years to how search results appear in order to keep more traffic flowing to Google's own properties rather than vertical search. That puts those vertical companies in a tight spot, since if users don't easily find them through Google, they may not find them at all. This is illegal, the states claim, because the goal and effect is to entrench Google's share of the search market, rather than to steer users to the best results. According to Forbes in December 2020, the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and 46 states filed an antitrust lawsuit against Facebook, who had acquired WhatsApp, Instagram, and Oculus. A judge dismissed the lawsuit, which is being appealed currently by the states and FTC. Now, Dr. SciFi Noble, who wrote Algorithms of Oppression, talks about Google's share of search as a search engine, and also talks about how it is a company that's an advertising company. It is not a search company that's goal is to give you the best search results. She gives examples of how if you do a search on Martin Luther King Jr., there will be a website that comes up that's actually owned by a white supremacist group that purchased a domain about Martin Luther King Jr., and people are becoming radicalized by these search results. This is a big problem, having a small set of companies owning so many portions of the market. And as people are trying to go through the proper channels to get them to be deregulated and to be split up and not be as big as they are, these tech companies are finding ways and loopholes and sort of swimming through the system to continue business as usual. And that's a problem. All right, well, let's go.
So let's dive into the discussion. Okay, I'm just going to play off of the last ethical dilemma because I have so many thoughts about this. And my first question for you, Shamika, is how do we feel about Google monopolizing our access to digital information?
That is an excellent question. I think as someone we're both in information science, which has its roots in library sciences. So when you think about the way that people search for information, if they go to Google, it looks official. It's got these rankings, so you know that the quote unquote best information is at the top. And when you're looking for directions somewhere, or conversions, or temperatures, or song lyrics, these kinds of things that seems pretty straightforward, it seems like you're getting the best results. But if you're looking for things like systemic racism, or if you're trying to find out more about critical race theory, or whatever the case may be, some of these more nuanced and subtle topics, then going to Google to find answers, you're going to be finding whoever is the highest bidder on those particular search words. Google Ads allow different people to purchase words and phrases and get their results bumped up higher in the list, and that gives those advertisers a lot of power over information. So Google is not trying to organize this information at the best interest of the people using the search engines. They're catering to the advertisers, similar to a lot of tech companies who provide quote unquote free services. You've heard before, if the product is free, you're the product, right? So I think that's one of the bigger issues here.
Yeah. Oh, definitely agreed. I did not know that you could pay for the search words like that. That's a little bit spooky. What I have thought of before, though, is especially in regards to search on Google, something that blew my mind not too long ago was when I discovered that Google it has a personalized recommender system for its search algorithm. It's much more nuanced than that, because Google, its coveted search algorithm is like what keeps Google running. But a big part of the way that it works is, more recently, I think in the last decade or so, it's become personalized. And so it caters to what it thinks is the best result for you. And I'm going to put air quotes around best, because what is the best result to a search query to try to access information and knowledge in this day and age? I don't know what's best for me. Maybe if I'm searching something that's not good for me, the best result would just be for nothing to come up. I don't know. But it takes into account different things that it knows about you, and by it I mean like Google. And so if you are searching in a different location than somebody else, but you're searching the same phrase, you might get a different answer, which is like, a lot of people don't realize that this is happening, and so they assume that anybody searching anywhere in the world for the phrase mango is going to get the same exact search results, and that's like so not true. And it's weird because it feels like there's like Google's this gatekeeper of like access to knowledge globally, and as we become more and more digitized, I get very worried that they have so much power with that gatekeeping. It's not just gatekeeping and access to like social media and connection. It's gatekeeping to like our access to understanding this world and this reality that we live in. And that, oh man, it scares me.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. There are researchers who set up like virtual machines that are located in different parts of the country. And I think Dr. SciFi Noble has done this work as well, where they set up these virtual machines. They end up they do searches on different things, and they compare the results so that they can see, if you're in a red state versus a blue state, what happens if you search certain key terms, this kind of thing. And you're right to be concerned that all of this power and this knowledge and this information is being held by this one company, because bless their hearts, not everybody's using DuckDuckGo. And I don't know how they're going to get a foothold on the market when Google is got such a stranglehold on the market that they have. And so it's really unfortunate that it's the case, but we have to ask ourselves, like Dr. SciFi Noble says, there should be a public search engine that's like done through the government or done through public institutions or a consortium of universities or something, librarians. Back to the library science piece, where people are looking for information and they're getting it in a way that is prioritizing the information and not the advertisements. Like, I think back to the early days of YouTube. When you went to YouTube, you or I, we go to youtube.com, we'd see the same page. Yeah. That is never going to be the case again. Sites like YouTube, sites like other social media platforms, when you go to your home page, the content that's being served up is all personalized. So that makes a huge difference.
Definitely. Yeah, and also I feel like I do a little bit of work in recommender systems, so I think the idea of personalization is not inherently bad. A lot of people, even like my own friends that I talk to, and I ask them how they feel about having personalized ads, some people are a little bit creeped out, but most people say like they would rather have their ads be relevant than random, and so they don't mind having things that are personalized. Like they're not going to go out and like riot in the streets if they don't have personalized ads, but they're very like they're okay with it. They're content with it. And I think in general, personalization makes me a little bit hesitant when I think about some of the arbitrary aspects of it, because in order to personalize an algorithm, you have to set some sort of metrics to allow your algorithm to know that this is what you like and this is what you want. And so I think recently, I can't remember, it might have been the New York Times came out with this crazy report on TikTok and the algorithm. They did like an algorithmic audit of the TikTok algorithm, and they discovered that one of the biggest factors for the TikTok algorithm to think that you liked something was for you to hover and spend a lot of time on it. And I think in a lot of circumstances, that metric and that rule for the algorithm makes a lot of sense, because if I like something, I'll watch the whole video, and maybe I'll watch it 2 or 3 times. But actually, our collective PhD advisor, Casey Fiesler, pointed out pretty succinctly and quickly after this report came out too that hovering does not always indicate a good thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you like that content. Sometimes you hover because it was really offensive, or sometimes you hover because you don't believe it and you think it's fake news and you're just trying to suss something out. Or maybe you hover over it because you can't get away from the content and you're intrigued by it, but you know that it's bad for you and it doesn't make you feel good. And there's a lot of ways that in this report they discovered that we as users and content consumers are being sent down these like rabbit holes of despair sometimes, because we're being measured by the algorithm. It's figuring out what we like to spend the most time on, even if that's really bad for us, and then it's feeding us more of that. So it's all about like user retention and time consumed on the platform, as opposed to like our actual well-being and what makes us feel good and what we like and what we want, what we truly want to see. And so when I think about things like search too, that scares me a little bit, because I don't know how this algorithm works. I don't know who it thinks I am. I don't know what its different rules and constraints are. And so how am I supposed to believe that it's going to give me the best, most accurate results to me, even if it thinks that it's giving me the best results for me? Like even in certain countries, some of the top results, like in countries, I think this was maybe in Myanmar, in Southeast Asia, for a while, their Google search results during like this big civil unrest that they were having, the top results were like Western-centric opinions and views on the conflict, instead of the first results being from the actual country itself and like personal accounts of what was happening. And so there's these subtle harms that are coming out of this kind of technology. And even if the Google engineers have the best intent in the world, even if they want to make this world a publicly accessible, better place with lots of knowledge, at the end of the day, like, you can't predict all the potential harms that happen from a personalized, globalized system like Google search.
Absolutely. And speaking of like time spent on these apps and this kind of thing, like trying to increase that time, are you familiar with the time well spent movement that was started by Tristan Harris?
No.
Yeah, so this was an ex-Googler who, they were working on Gmail, I think, and they were like, gosh, email just sucks up a lot of time, and maybe there's a better way to do this. So they like put this manifesto together about how they could redesign things so that people aren't spending all their time on their apps. And it got a lot of traction within Google, and then it ended up leaving Google to pursue this notion of time well spent, where instead of apps being designed to get you to stay on them as much as possible, it was the opposite, where it was like, we serve the function and then we just sort of are designed to get you back out into the world and off of your phone. And this movement is part of what sparked some of the changes to smartphones, where it's like, this is how much time you spent on this app, or having a night mode, or having a thing where that it'll turn off certain apps at a certain time, like this kind of thing. So there are people who have, and I think he started the Center for Humane Technology, or is affiliated with them. Nonetheless, there are people who are trying to combat these sinister practices and different dark patterns and these kinds of things and harms that these technologies are creating, which is good to see out there.
Yeah, that's always good to know. And also, fun fact about, I think it's the Center for Humane Technology is what it's called. I think one of the other people who helped found it, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's one of the people who created the Infinite Scroll. So he like unleashed havoc on society and created this, like, what at the time was like a great marketable feature for tech, and then realized that everybody was addicted to their technology now, and then committed his life to doing better.
See, there you go. If more people, well, if you have to do something horrible in order to turn your life around, there's going to be a lot of horrible things going on in the world. But that brings me to my next point. So you mentioned about in your ethical dilemma, you were talking about what tech leaders in the circle, what Eamon, I'm forgetting how to say his name.
Maybe it's Emin.
Eamon, yes. So he's this tech leader who's being a proponent of transparency, but in actuality, he is a very private person. So I have heard these stories about how tech leaders actually, they have these companies that do social media and all these digital things, but for their children are not online. Their children do not have access to gadgets and all of these sorts of things. So there's this like discrepancy between what they're selling and what they're pushing out to the public, and then what they're actually doing in their private lives.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I think it, like, who was it? I want to say like some people who were really big higher ups at Apple didn't let their kids have iPhones for like a very long time. And people who worked for like Microsoft or I think it was Microsoft, like wouldn't let their kids have computers or like play video games at a young age. And yeah, it's funny how like the people who create these technologies, they often don't realize what they've unleashed on the world until it's a little bit too late. And then I don't know, like how do they feel about it? You know, like how does Mark Zuckerberg sit
I'm sure they're sleeping
in a
fine.
chair at night and like think about all of the unintended consequences of what he created? I wonder if he actually thinks about that.
I can't profess to know, but I highly doubt it. I think about like if you are the CEO of a fast food company, but you're also a health nut and like you never touch the stuff. Like it's kind of like that. Not that that's, I don't know if that's actually a case in real life, but I feel like this is similar to that scenario.
It is. It's interesting. I mean, it's like, I was about to say, can you separate the artist from the art? But I think in this scenario, we don't like the art or the artist, so maybe that's not very
So there's
metaphorically in line with what we're going for here.
Yeah. Yeah. Just death to technology. Just skip the whole thing and start over. Just scrap it.
That's the conclusion of Sci-Fi IRL is actually to let you all know that you should never use technology again. And cut.
Good night, everybody.
Well, I do have another question for you. So we're speaking about like the Emin, this guy in this movie, the CEO, and how he was just totally not willing to sacrifice his privacy, even though he believed in this product so much. And I'm curious how you feel about that. So if you had to choose between transparency or privacy, let's make this like total extremes too. Like if you had to choose between like being fully transparent like they were in the movie or being fully private where like nobody can know anything about you.
Wow.
What would you rather be?
So if I'm off the grid or if I am the grid. So I'm thinking of like I'm thinking of that Johnny Depp movie where he gets uploaded and it's like Lawnmower Man, but it's not Lawnmower Man.
The Transcendence, right?
Transcendent, yeah.
Yeah, we did an episode on that.
We did. You should watch it. We'll link it up
episode.
above. Yeah. So basically those are the extremes. So I feel like there are pros and cons to both. Being transparent makes me feel like I also have access to a lot of information that I wouldn't otherwise. Like if I'm private, I'm cut off from information. But if you're transparent, there's always someone after you. Like there's always some evildoer or bad actor or someone who's like tracing you down and tracking you down and all this stuff. So if I'm off the grid, then I'm out of trouble. Like it's not a big deal. So I guess if I had to pick one or the other, like I would go with privacy because I feel like that's the safer route, and I could just hang out in a cabin in the woods and make butter or something and just be happy. I'd be fine.
What they used to do pre-technology days.
Yeah.
Hanging out in cabins, making butter.
Exactly. It's like that. There's what is it called? There is a aesthetic that I heard about, and it's all over Pinterest, and it's like cottagecore.
Cottagecore? Is that what it's called?
I believe so. Cottagecore is a fashion aesthetic promulgated by teenagers and young adults celebrating an idealized rural life. It was developed throughout the 2010s and received the name on Tumblr in 2018.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So I would pick privacy and I would pick up cottagecore as a lifestyle.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think for me, I would probably do something similar. I think I like the idea of the cottagecore butter making lifestyle. I think there's like pros and cons to each side. With privacy, it's a little bit lonelier, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're being like disconnected from technology nowadays almost means being disconnected from society and community. Like even when I in college chose to not have a phone for a few months, I missed a bunch of events because my friends invited me online and they didn't know that I wasn't using like my phone or social media at the time. And so I missed things because they didn't reach out in any other way, because that's not really what we do anymore. And then people stopped calling me because they knew I wasn't going to answer. It just slowly, like, things start to unravel in terms of this like human Homo sapien community that we've created, because we've now like transported that to the cloud. So the isolation and the loneliness wouldn't be so great. But then on the fully transparent side, like there's so many negatives there too, because you think about like content creators and really famous people online and celebrities, that does not seem like a particularly fun life in a lot of ways either, just because you're under so much scrutiny. Like I can't imagine every single word that I say being criticized and judged and challenged by so many people, like millions of people, that billions of people. There's no way to please anybody, and then there's also trolls everywhere. So I feel like I don't know if I could handle that kind of public judgment of my own personal life. So I agree. I think like if I had to choose between the lesser of two evils, privacy would probably be better, just to go to this more like primitive form of living. I think that it would be maybe a little bit cathartic, even if just a little isolating.
True. Well, I mean, in The Circle, you have that scene where May is reaching out to her parents and the world is watching, and her parents are getting down and dirty and everybody sees. And like I remember reading all the different comments that were coming up on the screen, and there were people that were like, it's not your fault and it's okay, and it's good to see that they're still getting it on at their age, and like just all these different comments from people. And throughout the movie, I think they did a really good job of showing different opinions as things were unfolding through the sea change experiment. But then, of course, you have the other software that they were releasing that was Soul
Search.
Soul Search.
Yeah.
Right. Where they find a criminal and then they find a friend. I don't know. She tried, and she bent to peer pressure to locate her poor friend. And I again use that term loosely because she was not a good friend in that moment. And so that kind of transparency can affect people around you, because this also reminds me of so the camera, when it was created, like the video camera, it didn't have sound, but as soon as they added sound to it, then that changed the law, because when you were recording people in public, you had to have their permission to record audio, or it had something to do with phone tapping, or wire tapping or something like that. And so there's a computer science scholar who has looked into this, and I'm forgetting their name. They're at Harvard. LaTanya Sweeney.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So she has a really great talk that sort of outlines this trajectory of how a technological affordance changed the law and changed how people sort of acted in society in a certain way. Because if you are in public and if you can be photographed in public, that's one thing, but being filmed in public with audio is another thing. We've seen how video and audio has become front and center now in social justice issues, because for years we've had things like Emmett Till happen, and in fact there was photography that was used then because the mother of Emmett Till, who was a little boy who was killed by white people because a little girl said that he had whistled at her or something like that while he was walking down the street. He was visiting his cousins in the South. He was living in the North, and he was brutally murdered, and his mother decided to have an open casket so that the world would see what they did to her son. And people took pictures at the funeral of this boy, and it made the front news of the papers. And this was sort of evidence that people were mounting to say, this is wrong, this is happening, this is wrong, and this needs to change. And so now you have people who are using their cell phone cameras to videotape police brutality, and it's slowly been mounting in evidence and pressure on the judicial system to actually indict these police officers for the murders that they're committing. So these technological affordances are literally changing laws, judicial systems, and lives.
Yeah, well, you actually just reminded me, I mean, speaking of, not to quote Emin, the CEO of The Circle, but how transparency breeds accountability, when we talk about police officers and just more generally like tech companies at large and any sort of technology, like there is an argument to be made that more transparency is better for these like public centralized entities, because more transparency means there's less opportunities for corruption and less opportunities for secrets being kept, and less opportunities for breaking laws behind closed doors. So I do see the arguments for transparency in certain circumstances, but you reminded me of some of the interesting, like, what would you call it? The technological affordances. Thank you. The technological affordances, and you were talking about this like body cams on police officers. It reminded me of this thing that has started happening recently because of the technological affordances of YouTube, for example, and how you know what I'm gonna say.
Oh,
I think
my
I might have
gosh.
heard of this from you, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so YouTube is YouTube's just kind of a crazy place in general for copyright types of legal issues and concerns. But as you probably know, YouTube has copyright legal policies against putting certain music in your videos unless they are a certain kind of video. And I mean, we could talk for hours about free use and all that stuff, but basically the gist of it is if you use certain videos in your use certain music in your YouTube videos, then they'll keep the video up, but they'll just mute the video. And so police officers now will blast on their phones certain copyrighted music while they're doing unjust things as a civil servant, so that when people try to take videos of what the cop is doing and post it on YouTube, nobody can hear what the cop is saying because it's been muted, because Taylor Swift Blank Space was playing in the background, because Taylor Swift is on her copyright law. She's the most on top of copyright law out of any musician I've ever known for like the last decade, but it's like not a good way to use a technological affordance.
See, and this is another example of people in power who are using the way that the system is set up right now in their favor, right? So, oh gosh, yeah, it's very frustrating, and I would hope that the people on the ground who are, because what they're doing is they're trying to go to YouTube, use YouTube Live from their phone or Facebook Live or something like that. And then if it gets copyright stricken, the video could be taken down, or they can leave it up and then just it can't be monetized. And like you said, they mute it and this kind of thing. But this just means that people have to be even more creative and clever to try and get around the other things. So it's like just adding obstacle to injury, like you're having to figure out these complicated systems, and then on top of that just try to usurp the added issues that these people in power are placing on you. So it's not right. All right, so my last question for this discussion for you, Jess, is how do you feel about being surveilled? There are all these different ways in which your life is being viewed or consumed, collected, data about you is being collected and whatnot. So how does that make you feel as you go throughout your day? Do you even notice that surveillance? Or what happens when you do notice that surveillance? Like if you look up on Google or Facebook what they think of you, like what they think you are as a person, like your identity. Have you done that before?
Not on Google, on a few other places though. Yeah, I didn't know you could do that on Google.
I don't remember if it's Google or Facebook. I know Facebook does, I think for sure, like what they think you are for marketing purposes. And it's like, you are this year old, this gender at this location who believes these kinds of political things. Yeah.
Oh, I need to go look that up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in general, I'm not a huge fan of surveillance. I'm not gonna lie. I don't really know anybody who is, though, to be fair, except for maybe some of the people in this movie who were just huge fans of transparency.
Right? Well, the people making the products who don't have to worry about being surveilled themselves.
Yeah. So I guess those people, maybe they have nothing to hide, but what is that? There's like an expression that's like, you shouldn't fear surveillance if you have nothing to hide or something like that.
That's definitely a sentiment that people say, well, if you have nothing to hide, I'm not worried about it. I'm not doing anything wrong. So I shouldn't worry about, and it's like, you shouldn't have to be doing something wrong in order to be worried about surveillance. Like, that shouldn't be a prerequisite for the situation.
Yeah, it's sort of like with the, so in the US, something like the Fourth Amendment, which requires like a warrant to enter an establishment or have some sort of probable cause to, I guess, look into people's stuff and to infringe on their privacy. It's basically like our right to privacy. There's been a lot of contention with this kind of law because there's people who think that no matter what, if we do something wrong, we should be held accountable for it. And so surveillance is okay because if you're being surveilled and you do something wrong, then you deserved to be punished for that wrongdoing, and so it doesn't matter that you were being surveilled. But then other people say, like, well, actually that isn't okay because I don't want to be constantly surveilled and constantly worried that somebody is going to be ready to punish me if I do something wrong, because we all do stuff that's wrong in subtle ways or in extreme ways all the time because we're human. So that's like, when I think about surveillance, I kind of think about that tension a little bit, because I have also wondered myself, you know, when I'm surveilled, am I a better person? Like because they kind of talked about this in the movie too, like if I know that somebody's watching me, like for example, if I live with several roommates, if I know that my roommates are home and I get home and it's been a long day, I'll probably go spend some time with them, maybe try to make like a healthy dinner, read a book and go to bed. But if I lived by myself and I had a rough day, would I just, you know, watch TV and complain in my head and just like lounge on the ground and not do, like, would I be a better person, or am I a better person because I'm being surveilled and watched by people in my life? Or like if I'm online, if I'm on Google, there have been times when I've like Googled phrases and things that like I'm wondering somebody's brought up, or it's like something, whatever it is, where I'm like, I don't want this to be in my history for whatever reason. And like I've noticed, usually it's because I don't want the personalization algorithm to jump on that and to start giving me ads about things. So like there are ways that I've tried to like obfuscate, or I guess like kind of get around this like surveillance digital space that we all live in. But I don't know if like just because I might be a better person when I'm surveilled in some ways, if that means that I like being surveilled, because I think I'm a happier person when I'm not being surveilled. I think I feel more free when I know that I have a private life and when I know that I have my privacy. And so in like the real world, I think in general, I would never want to be surveilled, because I prefer to know that I have that privacy, that I can go in my room, shut my blinds, and know that nobody's watching me. But in the digital world, it's trickier because I don't know if that room exists. is there a digital space online where we can just shut the blinds and know that nobody's watching us and nobody's collecting that data and nobody knows what we're doing? Is it just when we're offline? Is it even when we're offline? Like, I'm not too sure. It's weird. In general, I would say not a fan of surveillance, but I think it's a complicated relationship. But what about you?
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about this YouTube Red original series called Bad Internet, and there's an episode called Your Search History Revealed, and it's about this family who's this anonymous style hacktivist group releases the public's internet search history, and it follows this family as their search history is being released, and the world just comes to an end. It's like, it's hilarious and scary, and a lot of their episodes are like that. It's sort of like a play on the Black Mirror style. But I have this thought as well, like, what happens one day if someone is able to just access all of my search histories? Like, that would not be okay. I would take issue with that. I take umbrage, sir, at that possibility. Yeah, and I think in terms of how do I feel about being surveilled, I feel almost helpless in some ways, that it's impossible to navigate modern society without leaving a digital footprint that's owned by some company making millions and billions of dollars off of me. And I think about, like, what if there are ways to live outside of these systems, or live with better systems that we can build together as communities, centering marginalized experiences, and make an alternative that is viable to compete with these bigger companies. Because you talked about how big tech is, and if it's too big, which it is, because a lot of these tech companies have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They take this part, they take that part of these companies and these organizations, and they fold them into themselves and just get bigger and bigger, and have more and more reach in our lives, and it's harder and harder to avoid them, right? So I don't know, like, I would hope that more and more people are able to get involved in these conversations and take part in building and creating these alternatives that we desperately need. Because if we just wait on these companies to change, I mean, it's like the civil rights movement, where we've been told for years to calm down, sit down, and wait. And if people had done that, then we wouldn't have had the laws that are being overturned now. But essentially, we can't wait on these companies. We can't wait on these systems to change. And I think that if we are empowered with information and knowledge, ideally that's not just from a Google search, then we can really strive for and move towards real change.
Wow, I don't think I can say any. I feel like that's like a mic drop moment. I don't know if I have much else to say after that.
Well, in that case, that sums up this month's episode and our entire show. Oh my gosh. We hope this gives you all something to think about.
And as you may well know, and hopefully at this point you know, at the end of every episode, we ask a trivia question related to something that we covered during our sci-fi analysis. If you think you know the answer, send it to us in a tweet. The first person to get the answer will be rewarded with the knowledge that they got the right answer, because we will not have another episode to give you a shout out in. But feel free to reach out to us if you would like us to give you a personal DM shout out and a tap on the head. So today's trivia question is, what real-life tech company has a logo similar to the circles?
Think about it.
And before we conclude, we're just going to take a quick moment to reflect on all of this because this has been such a journey for us. And so, Shamika, I just want to give you a little bit of space to just share what you're thinking right now and just any final thoughts you have.
Yeah, I remember having the idea for this show years ago. I mean, years ago, before I had even applied to doctoral programs. And I remember being in New York City with my friends, and I mentioned to someone that I had this idea for this YouTube series, and I was waiting on this thing or that thing, and they were like, why are you waiting? Just do it. And I was like, you're right. And I continued to wait. But then I remember, this is the origin story of this show. So I remember we had class as first semester doctoral students for information science. And our professor had us do this assignment where we mapped out the different mentors that we need for our life. And these are those mentors.
Oh my gosh, you have it right there. That's
I have it right here. So I have all these different mentors, and one of them is, you can see it, YouTube creators. So when I partnered with Jess and I shared my mentors, and I was like, yeah, I want to do this YouTube series. And Jess was like, that sounds really cool. I'd love to do it with you if you need help. And I was like, yes! So that was like the push that I needed. That was the support that I needed. I could not have done this without you, Jess. So what I'm thinking about right now is just gratitude for all that you've done to bring this show to life and bring it to reality. So thank you.
Oh, wow, that is so sweet. Thank you. I mean, obviously this show couldn't have existed without you because this show is your creation, your idea, and I'm so blessed and happy to have been able to join it. And honestly, it's so wild to think back to that time because that was back when we were in person before COVID, which I think the majority of the show has actually been virtual. So it's crazy to think like our first few episodes, we were lugging all of this AV gear that we rented on campus between buildings on opposite ends of campus for a single day because it was a 24-hour checkout period, trying to adjust all the lights and the mics and the cameras, and we didn't understand how the technologies worked, so we were looking at all the guides, and it was honestly kind of a chaotic mess for a little bit, but it was a really good learning experience. And I think learning how to do this virtually also has been very humbling in its own ways. But in general, like my reflections now, my mushy gushy sentimental fool reflections are that I am just so grateful for this space to step up on soapboxes every once in a while and just like talk about the different dilemmas and things that we think are interesting in sci-fi and also in the real world. And I feel like in some ways we've kind of, some of the topics we've talked about have sort of been following our interests and the things that we're learning in our PhD program as well. So it's like a little bit of a personal narrative of our stories as we're beginning to come into this space and learn more about what it means to be a PhD student in tech ethics in the first place. So I'm super grateful for this and for all of you people who have been watching us and staying and tuning in for this journey as well. So we hope this has been useful for all of you, and that this is something that you can take with you, and some of these lessons you can take with you into your movie theaters and your daily lives.
Absolutely. Well said.
And I guess we can conclude with that. So if you like this content, feel free to click that like or subscribe button and share it with your friends.
This has been
Sci-Fi in real life.
Oh, and I really mean it this time. Good night and good luck, you